Good afternoon. I'd like to invite everybody, as you're able, to get a cup of coffee, get something to eat, and we're going to get started. Welcome. My name is Liz Costello. I'm your Associate Rector here at St. Thomas's Church. And it's a joy to be able to be with you all at this adult forum today on the Feast of St. Francis that we've transferred from October 4th to today. And it's very fitting that we would be talking about outreach. And the particular focus of our time together we'll spend on thinking about the ways in which the church has changed its approach to outreach from being more of a benefactor to becoming a friend with the least of these. So I know that I'm talking to a room full of experts here. I know I'm looking out and I'm seeing a lot of, for example, ECS folks. I know I'm looking out and I'm seeing folks who are involved in the second Saturday sale. I see some folks who go down to Honduras and who go and install water pipes. So I know that I'm talking to a room who you all are already deeply committed and involved in outreach. So what I'm hoping this will be is kind of a reflective time for us all to engage in some material and then share personal stories of transformation. Because I don't know about you, but my experience in outreach or faith in action is that I often receive more than I give. It's like the prayer of St. Francis, that is through giving we receive, right? And I don't know about you, but I have been transformed by my encounters with Christ and the people I serve. You know, you think you're going to be the one who's going to be Christ's ambassador, and really, you're the one who's receiving Christ, right? And as we go out into the margin. So I'm hoping just by having that preface, I'm kind of honoring the wisdom in the room, and I'm inviting you to share your experience as we go through this conversation. We'll have a little time in the beginning where I'll share some models of engaging in outreach as it's evolved throughout the church, and then towards the end I'm going to invite you all to share personal stories, and we have somebody who's going to start us off, Chris, who's going to start us off by sharing a personal story, and then we'll all kind of follow suit with our small groups. So we know as Christians, we're called to serve, right? We know that as baptized Christians, we love to quote the baptismal covenant, that we're called to seek and serve Christ in all human beings, right? That we're called to recognize the dignity of every human being. And notice, these human beings, they don't have markers of identity. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, if you have documentation, if you don't. It doesn't matter your race, ethnicity, your class. We're all called to serve fellow human beings because God made us all, and we're all God's children. And as Christians, we're defined by our love for others. And so we know this. And so we know that this is, when we engage in outreach, it's a way for us to fulfill and live into our baptismal vows that we are reminded of every time we baptize another Christian. November 5th will be the next time we as a community gather to baptize another Christian. A couple people will be baptized, a couple babies in this case. And we'll get the chance to join in that baptismal covenant, and we'll all be reminded of what we've promised by virtue of our baptism. So for us, it's not necessarily whether we should engage in outreach, but how, right? How do we engage in outreach? And just to kind of jog our memories and get us thinking about it, I put on the screen different words or terms that are used in different churches when they're trying to name the thing that we're doing, right? You could say it's outreach. You could say it's faith in action. You could call it advocacy, social justice, charity, public witness, urban and social concerns committee, social engagement, community organizing like FLOC or IAF, Industrial Areas Foundation, might encourage. You could call it service or mission. I wonder, just talk to me. What words have you heard in churches that you've been to? What's most familiar for you that's on the screen? Or did I miss any? Outreach, yeah. Service, yeah. And so Outreach is a great word. You know, we always have a problem with language. It never quite fully, completely describes what we're trying to get at. And I know here at St. Thomas, our outreach is built on a relationship, right? But through the church's work in the past, we've kind of evolved in how we've seen it. So there are three basic models that the church has engaged in with social engagement. And I'm taking these three models, these three categories from the Reverend Dr. Sam Wells. He was the chapel dean at Duke Divinity School when I was there, and I took a couple of classes with him, and he's now the vicar of St. Martin's in the Field in London, and he's wrote extensively about social ethics, particularly Anglican social ethics and social engagement, so addressing this. And so he's noticed that the church historically and presently engages in one of these three models, and maybe there's some carryover, maybe, you know, we're somewhere in between, but there's the working for model, there's the working with model, and then there's the being with model, which is the one that he is going to ultimately propose as the one we should try to engage in. The working for model. So think with me. It's a model that we do things on behalf of other people. One person has a need. We have the skill set, the time, the resources, and we do it for them, right? This is a relationship where there is a clear benefactor and recipient, right? This could be money that, you know, somebody in a child in Africa, we can sponsor them to go to school, right? We have the means as, you know, Americans who are well off, and we sponsor that child to go to school. You know, this is also what dentists, lawyers, doctors, that's what they do for us all the time. We have a need. They have a skill, right? You know, dentists, they fix our teeth. They're fixers, right? And it feels good as, you know, when you think about your own work in outreach, when you can use your skills, your expertise for people in need. And it affirms us as useful, I think. You know, it feels good to be useful, like we have something we can share. And one of the flip sides of that relationship, if we're not careful, is we can just become a benefactor. We can become the person who thinks we know what another person needs, right? We can become paternalistic and maternalistic, and instead of asking what they need, we can just give what they need, right? We've heard these stories of churches who, you know, send a bunch of youth down for a mission trip, and they go to evangelize, and, you know, kind of an evangelical understanding of outreach, and the people are hungry, right? They never asked what they needed, right? Or I'm sure you can think of other examples of this kind of model. And I wonder, does anybody have one that's coming to mind? Anybody want to share one of these examples? And they're not bad in of themselves. Let me say that. It's not it's just that this is descriptive. Anybody think of one? So another flip side of this, oh, did you have your hand up, Merrick? Or?
One side, when I was in Africa, Trinity Church funded a borehole, water source for a village. And they came in and they built it. But they never asked people what they wanted. And they never worked with them to kind of develop what they needed and develop money. So it just sat there.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm sure, yeah, and John, you have another story you want to share. Right. And this is a lesson we've learned over and over again for those in the secular world or in the church faith-based world who are engaging in outreach. If you don't ask people what they need, then whatever you're giving them is not going to be really used, and it probably will ultimately fail. Another model that the Reverend Dr. Sam Wells puts forward is a working with model. And I think this is one that we can all really get behind and get excited about. So it's a model that recognizes that people who are poor aren't poor due to their lack of income necessarily, or resources, but because of a lack of access to power, privilege, social networks. So this is where the kind of social justice realm gets in, where you try to bring everybody to the table to help make the decision. This is the kind of community organizing model where you go out to a community, you have town halls, you ask what the needs are, you do some, have some conversations with folks for them to self-select and self-identify their needs and their leaders. And it's a model that really works well. It's a community-based model that seeks to ultimately share the power, share the resources by inviting everyone into the decision. And it's a model that thinks that a social problem isn't just one group's problem, but the entire community's problem. And we get this as Christians because we believe that we're part of a many-membered body of Christ, and what affects the hand affects the foot, right? As St. Paul said, the hand can't say to the, arm, I have no need of you, right? We're all interconnected. And so for a lot of us right now, the opioid crisis is really hitting us because it's hitting our community. But this has been going on for a long time. So how do we continue to open up our networks, right? So other people's issues become issues that we can get behind and help with. One of the tricky parts of this model, which is great, is that again, it can define a relationship by economics and by power and privilege and never cut through to the human-to-human interaction, right? You can use this model and let it, I'm not going to make these like kind of black and white, but if you never kind of go beyond just trying to help somebody to get to know their name, their family, and have their family be your family, then you miss the deep and joyful opportunity of this being with model. And the being with model that Sam Wells is putting forward as a model, he says, is based more on the work and model of Jesus. That, Jesus spent 30 years hanging out with us before he spent a week doing work for us. If you think about it, the week of Holy Week was work he did on our behalf. But before that, it was all about relationship and being with us. And so how do we make our outreach about the individual relationship? And I know I'm looking at all these mentors here. And I know that's what this mentor program is about. It's about being with. And it's about being with these young people who are going to teach you like you teach them. It's sharing your networks. It's sharing your resources that they might not have access to. And this being with model, you're using a working with, but also it can become also a being with, which I believe it will. The being with model is the model that, looks at the greatest gift that God gave us was to be with us in time and eternity. That's why God the Father sent God, the Son, so that we could, in all creation, be together. And I don't know about you, but when I've been in relationships, I'm thinking about one when my husband and I lived in a Catholic worker that offered hospitality to asylum seekers in England. And we had a couple of folks from the Middle East who were Muslim live there. And it was really eye-opening to me. And folks who had just become asylum seekers became Ebi, Jawad. They got names, and I got to know their stories. And it was the being with model in my own life. And I got challenged of some of my cultural assumptions. I used to get so annoyed at Jawad, who was about 55. He lived above my husband and I on the 3rd floor. And he prayed 5 times a day because he was a devout Muslim. And every morning, like at sun, the crack of dawn, he would be praying at like 4 in the morning and be like, oh. And then eventually, it took me a year because I'm slow. And then within a year, I was like, wow, this faithful man's piety is remarkable. I wish I had that prayer practice. Mine is so lacking, right? And that's what the being with model can do for us. It can challenge our own cultural assumptions. It can break open our worldview and allow us to see Christ in somebody who we might not otherwise have seen Christ in before. And so I wanted to take the next time, I've kind of talked for a while, I want to take the next, 10, 15 minutes for you guys actually to get in small groups. If you can, fill out these tables, folks who are sitting in rows in the back, and join a table or, just turn in on one another so you can kind of make a circle. And I'd like to invite you after Chris comes up here to share a story, to share stories of your own personal transformation and in the act of helping somebody, in the act of being with, or even working for someone.
Before I get started, and I just want to briefly tell you about my mentoring experience, I want to just thank both Molly McAndrew and Nancy DeLaura from ECS for being here, and a special thank you as well to John Kepner for leading our merry band of mentors. Thank you, all of you, very much. My mentoring experience is uneven, I think, is the best way to describe it. Sort of fits and starts, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of relationship. Started out with my mentee is a 21-year-old young woman, graduated from high school with honors, very good student, was intending to go to college, was on that track, decided to go into the military, that got derailed. Had some family issues, mom in jail, doesn't really have a relationship with her father. So a lot of the things that, frankly, I had not really dealt with one-on-one in my entire life. So it was a very unique experience for me. The relationship and developing the relationship with her was, as I said, uneven. Right off the bat, we started with an email address, and I was told to reach out to her via email because she would respond. That's the way she's going to communicate. Well, I reached out to her via email, and crickets, nothing, zippo, nada. Couple of weeks went by, I tried again, nothing. Finally get in touch with ECS, and they said, well, you know what, maybe try her cell phone. So I called, again, nothing. Finally, I texted her, and so it took several weeks of trying again and again different means of communication. So we settled into a sort of an easy relationship via text. We're planning on meeting for the first time down at ECS, and guess what? She didn't show up. So I texted her and said, are you coming? I'm here waiting for you. And her response was, oh my gosh, I forgot, I'm so sorry. Can you meet me tomorrow or another day? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to. The next text I got from her was, could you text me and remind me to come? And I said, no, I cannot text you to remind you to come. I'd like you to text me to tell me you're coming. And so she did, and our first meeting was very successful. I was very fortunate. She was very talkative. She was easy to get to know. It wasn't sort of a struggle of conversation. It was a very nice exchange back and forth. So the beginning of our relationship was a little uneven. Got a chance to meet with her several more times, trying to explore sort of what she wants to do with her life. She's kind of confused about that. And I recognized very early on that being a mentor is not being a parent. I'm the father of 3 daughters. I still tell my daughters what to do, even the married one. I really think you should do this. The reality is that's not mentoring, that's parenting. And I think parents can learn a lot from being a mentor, actually. So the relationship, again, has developed slowly. What I realized also is there was a college day at Gwynedd Mercy University that John was gracious enough to put together. What seemed like a great idea for John and myself and for faculty at Gwynedd Mercy for my mentee was not such a great idea for her. We had her set up. They were really interested in admitting her. She was interested in a couple of different programs. Guess what? She wasn't interested in that. And that was hard for me to understand because I thought it was at least worth kicking the tires and exploring. But she explained to me that it just didn't feel like the right fit for her. And so you have to respect that and appreciate that. So fast forward just till a couple of weeks ago, I was able to set her up with an interview at a local community bank. It's nice to have friends in high places. So she impressed him very much, just as she has impressed me. And I'm happy to say that she has a job now. So Rob Mack's going to make fun of me for doing this. I'm using the Rob Mack routine. But anyway, so she has a job. She's starting in a couple of weeks. She's very excited about it with the bank. And hopefully this will also lead to continuing education. And she can continue to grow and develop her skills and search for ultimately what she really wants to do with the rest of her life. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks. What a great story of how we are called to be in relationship with someone and how, it's a relationship, right? It's a mentorship, not I love that, describing how you're not a parent, but a mentor. So I'd like to invite you all to have some tabletop conversations for the next 10, 15 minutes. I'll give you kind of a reminder when we're halfway through. And just share a personal story of transformation. If it's easier to to couple and have maybe just 2 or 3 of you, that's fine. Or if you want to do it, around the table, feel free. And then we'll come together and I'll invite folks to share a story or two as you feel led. Thank you.
Very briefly, a lot of people who, I guess John Kepner, some of the people who are Mimi, but a while ago we used to have a prison ministry. And I had just had my son Jared. He wasn't 2, he was 6 months old. And so I had just kind of meandered back into church with my husband. My husband was very, very active. He's on the vestry. And there was 25-year age difference between us. And he had a completely different relationship with his church that I did. But Bob was so enthusiastic and bubbly about St. Thomas's, I started to come to church and I picked up this prison ministry leaflet. So what we did was every Monday night we had a group of us and we went and taught to get the students, I never called them prisoners, I called them my students, ready for their GED exam. And so I worked with the nuns from Chestnut Hill College because I had absolutely no idea how to teach. I had a degree in French, but I didn't take any teaching. So I kind of followed Jane Ballard around, and whatever Jane did, I did, because she was wonderful. And what she did was she asked each one of the students to read a sentence, and she was gently encouraging them to read aloud, because I discovered that they couldn't read, which was heartbreaking. I mean, they could tell you, they were so clever and they were so articulate. They would read Eldridge Cleaver. I mean, they would quote Eldridge Cleaver at the time, and this, that, and the other thing, Dr. King, but they actually, many of them could not read. So I kind of followed quietly, took notes from Jane, and one night, as I said, we would work 45 minutes on math. I did the math part, and then we'd give them to the nuns. The nuns taught them math. So one of the nights I said to the young men, would you like to read a sentence? And he was stammering. And I realized, oh my gosh, he can't read. So I kind of backed off a little bit. And I said very quietly, why don't you just try it? Because this is no evaluation here. We just want to see how much you know. We can work with you. And I get so teary. Because it happened 35 years ago. I still remember it. So one of the students said to the other, I said, why don't you go ahead and read? And the other student said, he said, no, I don't want to. And the other student said, it's okay. Mike's a sister. And I was just so touched that, because I'd never heard the term African Americans use sister, sister, brother. People weren't using it then. So I was just so moved and touched by the confidence and the fact that these men kind of accepted me. And that was it. Our group soared. They did get their GED equivalent, and we'd hear stories that so-and-so, got out and so-and-so got a job because he could, read and do math. So that was my story.
Thank you. Wow. Anybody else have a story, our last story that they want to share? Yeah, go ahead and come to the front. Let's give a hand clap, because, we Episcopalians. Awesome. Well done.
Hi, I'm Will. I work in nursing homes and have for the past decade. And I think the transformation is a transformation of me. My teachers have been the residents in the nursing homes. I was brought up in a different kind of church environment, one that was evangelistically minded. When I was younger, it was kind of win souls for Jesus. And so I approached my service in the nursing home that way. Not that I was going to convert people, but, do my little part that I could. There was a woman in this one nursing home who was Episcopalian, and there weren't many of them. I was not at that time, so it was kind of strange to me. She had anxiety issues, and I was like, just trust God, that'll fix everything. And I learned over time I wasn't going to change anything about her faith. But I learned from her that my church got smarter, and they taught us to be present with people and to understand that because God is present with us and God enjoys us, we can embody that for them. So I kind of changed my focus from fixing people and changing people to just being present with them and letting them feel enjoyed. And so now as I go, after years of experience, that's kind of how I approach my work. And when I'll have total strangers come up to me and they're like, this is more than a job for you. They can see it like right away. They see that there's, so I love that communicates. I feel like, okay, I'm doing something right. And when the residents will respond to me as well, they see me on my worst days when I'm frazzled and worn and can't hold it together, and they're very gracious with me. And I see them on their worst days, which we have many, but that being steady, and that I love that I can say, I will see you again tomorrow, and I can follow through because I'm paid to be there. So I feel incredibly blessed. And in a time when my faith kind of fell apart and I kind of stepped away from the church, this was my church. I encountered God in these people and in serving them. And when church groups would come into the nursing homes, I work in a Jewish nursing home now, so don't see that as much. But when church groups would come into the previous nursing homes I worked at, some of them would come in and, they were like, it's Christmas in July, let's sing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer for the church service. And I was like, what's this have to do with church? And then other people, the Lutheran group would come in, and my favorite part became when they would give the peace. They would walk around and they would see each person and they'd say, the peace of the Lord be with you. The peace of the Lord be with you. And in that moment, they saw these people. And to me, that kind of would make me almost cry each time I saw it. Because I knew these people. I could see that there was a connection that they, most of their days, did not get. So, not a good wrap up, but there you go.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Will. What a great example of your job becoming your vocation and the way in which you get to minister to people. And since it is a feast of St. Francis, almost, we transferred it to today. Francis often is quoted in saying, use words only when necessary, right? That let your life be your sermon. And what you reminded me of in your story, Will, is just the power of presence, right? And in our busy, always on culture, what a gift we can give to people when we do that, and how we mirror the love of God who simply wants to be with us first. And I think that is where the best advocacy comes from, is when you're in a relationship with another person and your heart breaks for what their heart breaks for, and they become your family and you start caring about what they care about. And that's, I think, what rooted and embodied advocacy looks like in certain contexts. I want to thank you all for sharing your stories of personal transformation. I've been really overwhelmed by your commitment to outreach here in this community and the way in which it is all about relationship. And I want to commend you and encourage you to keep on doing this good work. Keep on helping people learn how to read and being challenged and changed through that to the point of your heartbreaking. Keep on being present to the point where your faith is changed and you realize that your job is your vocation.